What's up, fam? Welcome to the Different Stokes podcast. I'm the wife, he's the husband, I'm the mom, he's the dad, and we are chatting about all things love, life, parenting, and culture. And we welcome you. Let's get into it.
Everybody's got a special kind of story. Everybody finds a way to shine. It don't matter that you got not a lot. So what? They'll have theirs and you'll have yours and I'll have mine. And together we'll be fine. 'Cause it takes different strokes to move the world. Yes, it does. It takes different strokes to move the world.
What's up, everybody? It's Meech.
And this is Martha. What's up, fam?
Welcome to the Different Stokes podcast, officially rebranded. We've talked about it quite a bit in our lost episodes, which you can find, of course, on Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts,
Spotify,
of course, and many other of your podcasting outlets. But in the Lost Files, we did discuss that we were rebranding and are now and forevermore known as the Different Stokes podcast. Yes, indeed. So glad you guys are joining us for this first episode of 2019. Can you believe that it's a new year?
I cannot, but it is, so we'll just roll with it.
2018 went by very quickly.
Blink of an eye.
And here we are, 2019, hoping to bring you guys a lot more content, more consistent content, and, just interacting with the people, because that's what it's all about. So before we get into today's discussion, Martha, why don't you get people in tune or get people up to date on our social media, because we made some changes there as well.
Well, we are at Different Stokes Podcast on Facebook. Our Twitter handle
At Meech and Martha.
At Meech and Martha.
Yep.
On Twitter, so we're there. If you are already following us, you don't need to make any changes.
Right.
Your follows will continue, and
that's it right now.
That's it? Okay.
Coming soon. YouTube channel coming soon, right? Instagram coming soon. We'll get you guys up to date once that is all squared away. So let's go ahead and get into it.
Let's talk about a great thing that happened in the last week, which was the clemency granting for Cyntoia Brown. That was a great development. The governor of Tennessee went ahead and granted her clemency. Fortunately, she won't be released until August of 2019 from prison. And if you guys are not familiar, Cyntoia Brown is a young lady that was a victim of human trafficking and used in the sex trade, was forced into prostitution, and subsequently came in contact with a predator that she ended up killing and taking his life. And she was tried for murder and convicted and has already served, I guess, 15 years.
Right. She was sentenced to, I think, 51 years.
Sentenced to 51 years.
Right.
And has already lost 15 years of her life.
And she was 16 when she was convicted.
Exactly.
So that's even crazy to think about. I mean, obviously, we see other cases where, unfortunately, young people kill other people and they're tried as adults.
Mm-hmm.
But in this instance, many believed that justice wasn't served. Many activists...
It wasn't.
Right.
Yeah, it wasn't. So...
And many activists, many people have been petitioning the governor of Tennessee, the state of Tennessee, to grant this clemency for Cyntoia Brown. And it looks like it has finally paid off. So the hard work of those activists, those people who fought for her clemency, we certainly appreciate. I know she definitely appreciates. Her family, of course, is excited that in August she will be a free woman. Now, she still is going to be on probation.
And that's hard to
and
swallow.
That's unfortunate.
But freedom is something that was the ultimate goal. So it's not fair freedom. Again, she's already lost 15 years of her life, having to wait another 8 months
right
to get out. And she's going to spend another birthday in prison. Her birthday's coming up January 29th. She will turn 31 years old while in prison. And like you said, she's been there since she was 16. So this is, it was was a lot of a completely unjust situation. If you're a minor and you're lured into sex trafficking, the sex trade, and, put in these positions where she ultimately felt that her life was threatened and defended herself, taking a life, it's just, a horrible outcome to then end up in prison. You would think that the justice system would look at her at that time that she was tried 15 years ago as a victim and want to help her. But instead, they looked at her as a criminal and wanted to criminalize her and punish her.
Yeah, I mean, obviously someone did die, so, the circumstances and everything of that death is obviously something that came to light during the trial. So, and still in the midst of that, she was convicted, and so but I do think it speaks to the need for some juvenile criminal reform in our country. I mean, the fact that can happen is just a lot. And we know even from totally separate supposed crimes, totally separate situations, but you look at the story of Khalif Browder, also was a minor, being sent to an adult maximum security prison, that being Rikers Island. I mean, stories like this definitely give us pause when we think about what could be. And if you guys are hearing any additional chatter in our podcast today, we're a family, we're husband and wife. We're the mom and dad portion. So we have kids home today. It's the weekend. Kids are here and we live a family life. So you may hear our 9-year-old with her laughter and chatter because she's a happy kid. So I would imagine with the Cyntoia Brown thing, one other thing I want to point out before we move on is that these 8 months that she has to serve before she's released, they probably are going to be the hardest 8 months of
right. I mean, and I question, hopefully that it's a good well, I don't know how good prison environment can be, but you just wonder, like, is she at risk for being harmed? Just right. All the things that maybe it's watching too much television in terms of, scared straight of what prison is like. But God, 8 months to freedom, just anything could happen. So you just worry,
Right, especially if, obviously, you would imagine that word gets around that she's going to be released. And, that kind of can breed, I would imagine, jealousy and a number of different things. So you do probably worry about her safety a bit, but hopefully precautions are being made and steps are being taken to make sure that these 8 months go as smoothly as they could possibly go so that Cyntoia can be freed and reunited with her family. So it's definitely great news that
Excellent news. And surprising news, because Governor Haslam originally did not grant the clemency or announce granting her clemency when he announced some others. So we thought hope was lost in this case.
Thank goodness that, someone or somehow it was brought back to the forefront or on his plate, and he made the decision to grant her clemency. So great news. Obviously, we were talking about Cyntoia Brown and how she was a victim of, sex trafficking and being a part of the sex trade. It is a great segue into what has seemingly consumed culture the last week or so, and that is the Surviving R.Kelly documentary that aired on Lifetime, just a few days back. 6-part documentary that's highlighted some of the things that we've known about R.Kelly and his history of dealing with underage girls, and some new developments that we may not have known.
Yeah, definitely.
That has put quite the spotlight back on the aura, as you like to call them.
Yeah.
And not a positive spotlight.
No, I mean, it's a re-emergence of a story that we all knew, and we're familiar with, kind of, his history as it relates to young women. But this was on a scale that I don't think many of us were prepared for or knew it. Me, myself, speaking for myself, I wasn't prepared for what I learned having watched the Lifetime docuseries Surviving R.Kelly. So, I mean, and clearly with all the buzz and with all the chatter that it's getting from just regular people, celebrities, no one else, you know, it took a lot of us, I think, by surprise. The details of it, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Many alarming things. I mean,
yeah.
We're going to unpack some of that here as we progress through this episode. But yeah, I wasn't sure what to expect when I started watching it. And I'll be honest to say that it was a lot more than I expected. Definitely. After I watched it. It was a lot to unpack. I was definitely...
a lot to process.
Shook. Yeah, that's a better word. A lot to process. I was shook after watching the conclusion of it. I was just like, so many things, so many questions in my head. How, you know, are we still caping for this guy? How do we still buy tickets to this man's concert, download his music, buy his albums, whatever it is? I just don't understand. And
right.
Of course,
and I agree with you.
And that's not to say that we are like we can completely wash our hands of it, right? I mean,
we can't.
During times where we knew he was, you know, or knew of accusations of his involvement with young girls, we were still buying albums, we were still listening to music, me included, you included, we were still, you know, stepping in the name of love, we were still believing we can fly and all of those things. But now, you know, I think that a hard stance has to be taken for people to, as the movement that has started, and we saw highlighted in a documentary, says that it's time to mute R. Kelly.
Right, and I agree with you. And like you stated, we can't wash our hands of this. And I think part of what the docuseries brought to the forefront for me is that we did that once before. We did give R. Kelly a pass before, and he took full advantage of that. And when I say we, I mean the culture. I mean we as a people, for many reasons that we'll get into as we talk here today. You know, we just really want to have a meaningful conversation about, you know, this whole thing. And of course, you know, everyone's talking about it. So we want to chime in. Some of it's commentary, some of it's just wanting us to have a meaningful conversation and kind of process our own thoughts about what we saw and what it made us see within ourselves. So for me, I think we totally gave R. Kelly a pass. And I think some of what we're seeing right now in terms of the speak around this whole issue and the different sides of this issue, because you hit on it, that even right now we have people that are completely caping for R. Kelly. Some of these super fans are going hard on social media, as you know, everyone who is just completely appalled by his actions and his behavior as well. But just the fact that you have people out here that will stand up for him and kind of, you know, plead a case for him is just like crazy to me. But I think it speaks to what we all did, whether it was just being complicit or just not having our antennas up. I don't know what it was, but just as a culture, we gave them a pass for so long. And I think some of us are even toting that line now. Now we have more people that are coming out clearly disgusted, clearly appalled, and saying, you know, this has to stop. But in the same token, those same people will go on social media when you see the parents give an interview or whatever and rip these parents to shreds. These are otherwise good people who are saying, well, it couldn't have been, I mean, they're appalled by the behavior because they say things like, I would never, if it was my daughter, I would do this, I would do that. But, you know, it's a strange little space to occupy when you say that, but you yet can vilify these parents, in my opinion. I just wonder, is that a way that we're still enabling him by being disgusted? I mean, be fully disgusted. Don't be disgusted and then give a pass. I see people who are disgusted by what we learned in the docuseries, but will also attack the parents.
Right.
And say And okay, let me be clear about some things. Do I agree with everything I learned about some of these parents' choices? Absolutely not. But I do think it's risky behavior on our part to be tired, to be fed up, to really be canceling R.Kelly, but still saying the things about what the parents did wrong.
Right. So I want to backtrack a little bit before I get to your point about the parents, because that is a valid point, and I actually believe that the parents do have some culpability in this. But I want to backtrack to a point you made about trying to process and trying to understand why we still cape, quote unquote, for R.Kelly. And when I say we, I don't mean like me and you, but we as a people, as the culture. And it goes back to something that the psychologist, I think, that said in the documentary. He said that when we have a person or an artist or an entertainer that brings joy to our lives in some way, be it through their films or in this case through music, because let's face it, we hear certain songs, not just by R. Kelly, but by anyone, that we can remember where we were or what we were doing when we heard the song. And so
right.
R. Kelly, for many, Step in the Name of Love was played at, weddings, and I Believe I Can Fly was played at graduations, all important, times in our lives. And so because he provides, quote unquote, a soundtrack, or at least a piece of a soundtrack to our life, I think that a lot of times it is hard for us as a people to let that go. And whether that is a rational form of thinking or not, as the psychologist pointed out, it's factual. We have evidence of it, right now,
definitely.
and evidence of it with a lot of other entertainers that have committed misconduct, over the course of their lives. So
I agree. I mean, to this day, we know what we know about several entertainers, like you mentioned. It is a difficult thing, and I don't know what in the psyche causes that. If it's something to do with, of course, we're speaking from the Black experience because we're Black. We don't know another experience, but I wonder, like in other cultures, if you will, if that's a difficult thing. Is it just because we are already coming from a place of kind of an underdog mentality that we think we need to rally around those of us who have gained success, or that we need to, cover and protect?
Yeah.
I mean, I just wonder
there's
what,
a lot of
what
that just because of the African American experience in America. Like,
right.
We feel like we have to protect those that are in positions of importance, like in a lot of ways, especially if they get in trouble or the media projects them as a certain thing that that they may or may not be. We feel like we have to protect them, but in this case,
but why is that? Because there's so many tentacles on this octopus, if you will. Because if you look at, I think we're selective in when we do that, because obviously, and there's a whole conversation, we can have around why when it's Black girls who are being victimized, it plays a larger role in our inability to separate celebrity from immoral behavior, if you will. So and we'll get there, but I'm just saying, what is it, this issue that we have in being unable to always separate, our love of being entertained from our moral compass when the victims are Black girls who seemingly, if you watch this docuseries, it comes into question if we believe as a people that Black girls matter. Having been a Black girl, and now a Black woman, I can say there's a huge problem. There's a huge deficiency in our culture surrounding that whole thing, because you look at a celebrity like Tiger Woods, who, no, these girls weren't underage, and but we didn't have, no one was like, oh, we still love Tiger. He wasn't convicted of anything, but, it came out in the media that he had cheated on his wife with multiple women. And I only bring him up because his wife was white. So were we like, no one was like, we hate Tiger Woods now.
Right. And I was going to say that because the black community, I guess it just depends. I'm a big fan of golf, so is it okay for me to say I like Tiger a lot? So,
but you like the athlete. I mean, I'm just saying, in so many instances, we're not willing to hold celebrities, athletes, whatever, accountable. And I just wonder, this is just a question, I'm just putting it out there. Is it difficult for us because the fact that we hold so little to the lives of black girls and how they're affected? Because, okay, Floyd Mayweather, also a black man having relationships with other, sometimes black women, not every woman he's had a relationship with black women, but I think the woman that it came out that he was actually
abusing,
was
his mother of his children, if I'm
right,
mistaken, right?
A black woman that he I think he was actually charged and convicted of domestic abuse.
He went to jail
of domestic abuse, and yet we still and I use him as an example, even using myself as, a factor in how this shit can be studied, because I do believe that Floyd Mayweather is a great fighter, and I'm a fan of him as a boxer. And I don't think that I was ever like, I will not watch a Floyd fight. I don't like necessarily his, sometimes how opulent he can be, but I'm not bothered by his, it doesn't keep me from watching a fight. If Floyd announced a fight today with another boxer that I wanted to see, I would probably sign on to watch it. And so what is it about? So why aren't we, and should I be doing that? Should I be saying no, or, Bill Cosby was the most recent. So we all have our ideas about Bill Cosby. Obviously, again, his victims were not always black. I don't think most of them were at all. But I think I watched the first season of The Cosby Show, a month ago? The whole first season. So It's just a lot. There's a lot going on there, and a lot to deal with and unpack in terms of our inability to really hold celebrities accountable. Does your love of playing Step in the Name of Love at your family reunion outweigh your morality?
Right. And I think, a lot of times we struggle with the duality of people. Like, is it true that R.Kelly is this great musician and great producer and great artist? Yes. But is he also like the scum of the earth? Yes. Both of those things are true and can be true about any person, not just R.Kelly, so. Yeah,
and I think we pick and choose who we will hold accountable based on how we relate to the victim. And I guess that's what I was saying a moment ago directly. I mean, you look at Eddie Long, who, was obviously pursuing young black men, not necessarily minors. Well, did it come out that one was a minor?
I'm not sure. I don't want to speak inaccurately. I know he was having relationships with younger men in
the church, right. I mean, and we vilify him, we cancel him. It's just an interesting whole thing there when you look at who we will choose is worthy of canceling out that celebrity. Right. And in this case, leads us to, the other part of that topic that I'm saying, why do we hold black girls in so little regard? And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that black women, black girls, for as long as we can remember, for as far back as history can go, have been over-sexualized. We've been over-sexualized in every area, not just within our culture, but period. Across the board, there is this idea that we are, sexual beings, that we're overly sexual, that, we are always down for whatever, and that kind of whole mentality around black girls and black women. And I think it definitely affects everyone's ability to see us as victims, and everyone's ability to identify and believe that a black girl could actually not want to be taken advantage of sexually. There's this idea that because we're viewed as these sexual beings, that we're just always down for it, that it always, like, even with those girls, and that's why I speak to how that plays up in our culture. And I think we have a history of letting that whole narrative affect us within our culture, because I remember coming up as a young black girl and having older black women, identify me as quote unquote fast. And these are black women. These are women who probably should have had my back and should have been willing to go to bat for me and really have a problem with anyone being maybe predatory towards me. But instead it was like, don't walk like that, don't look like that, don't wear that, don't be fast.
Right. It's your fault. It's not
exactly
the fault of the man who may be older and who is being predatory. So the over-sexualized black woman, like, what's the origins of that? I know we talked about
I have some thoughts on it, and I'm no historic scholar, but I just look back at history, and I look at, we all know where our history started within this country, with slavery. And I just wonder, when you actually own a person and you have these young girls who grew into women, some who came as women and were owned by white men, I think right from the start we entered into this space of they're women. So yes, a man could find them attractive, and unfortunately some men could find even girls attractive if they have something wrong with them. And that whole it almost comes from a space where, the black woman and the black man together in slavery, that black man, or even a mother, not even, let's say, the man, but the mother of a black woman or black girl could not protect her. They could not protect her because they were all owned. So what do you do with that anger and with that feeling of helplessness when you cannot help or protect a young girl from the man that owns you both? I think you can internalize some of that, and some of that you can project onto that child who is then the victim. So there is the turn, if you will, in space where it's like, now I need you to not entice him. I need you to not, where that victim then becomes part of the problem, if you will. Not really, but just in the mental psyche for how they were able to process that and how they were able to deal with the fact that they weren't allowed to protect. So then it becomes, you shouldn't be over there. You shouldn't be wearing that. You shouldn't be moving in front of him. You shouldn't do, and I think it just, it just became this thing where we were always seen to have needed to do something differently.
Right, that's deep.
Needed to control ourselves or police ourselves in some way.
And even think about, too, and that is very in-depth thinking there, Martha. I would have never taken it there, but now that you bring it up, but just think about how even way back, how black women were, the imagery. You always saw exaggerated butt and breast and lips and all of those things that lead to that notion that black women are over sexualized. So it is a very interesting point of view, a very, very deep point of view, and many, many accuracies in that when you evaluate exactly how we got here. But circling back to the documentary, and you brought up the point of the parents, and that seems to be one of the big sticking points of this documentary, especially from those that seemingly, as you were saying earlier, still don't want to completely put all the blame on R.Kelly, right? Yeah,
they're holding back a little.
Yeah, so with these parents, and I struggle in this area because I do believe that as a parent, right, we do have a responsibility to our children. And so with that in mind, I do believe that the parents in some of these cases have some culpability, right? Obviously, the one set of parents who had the daughter who was 19, who was off in college and left with R. Kelly while she was away at school.
Joycelyn Savage.
Joycelyn Savage, okay. The parents probably didn't have a whole lot of control in that situation, right? Because when you're away at school, right, I know I was away from school. I was away at school. My grandparents didn't know what I was doing, didn't know where I was, didn't know who I was with.
Right.
So it is that one is understandable. And then you have the set of parents who took their child to the R. Kelly concert. Now, this was well after accusations and trials and all of those things. So they went to the R. Kelly concert for the father's birthday. And then the daughter somehow was invited on stage with a group of girls, and I don't know if they danced or sang along. I don't know what they were doing, but then they somehow get backstage because she's an aspiring singer, and then that starts this whole thing with ultimately her becoming a part or in R. Kelly's flock, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, and that, I will say everything post trial, I mean, and not to say that there weren't a lot to be concerned with pre-trial, because pre-trial was Aaliyah, was, a lot of accusations, a lot of settlements being reached and paid.
Obviously, that was a subject of the trial.
Right, that was a subject of the trial, but I will just say in terms of public knowledge, everything post-trial, I have a hard time just processing or rationalizing why a parent would. That's kind of where I get stuck. I have some speed bumps, if you will, in my mind, of trying to relate to these parents' choices. However, like I said before, my biggest issue with what I see, I mean, and these people are going hard on these parents. We're talking about it because this is not like subtle innuendo. This is not just a couple of people saying, oh, what about the parents? What about the parents? And it's a valid question, but in the same token, it's like, we have to be so careful with that. This is a man we already gave a pass to for over 20 years. And now when you tote that line of just not finally stepping up and just saying, you know what? No, this is a super predator, taking a word from the Clinton administration, 1994. Super predator. If the guys in the hood that were after me and that were after my friends and that some of us fell victim to, including myself, if those guys who were pursuing us at 13 and 14 and 15 years old, who were in their 20s and above, if they were just predators, he was and is a super predator for maybe no other reason than just the reach that his celebrity allows him. His celebrity allows him to cast a much wider net to get these girls. So I too have issue with parents who post-trial thought that it was okay to take their child, sister, cousin, niece, anyone within the vicinity of him. But in the same token, like I said before, understand we have to be purposeful and be unapologetic and be non-wavering and just simply just saying wrong is wrong is wrong is wrong and cutting him and not tote that line of, but what about those parents?
But see, I think we can acknowledge the misconduct and the deviancy of R. Kelly and still say, what were you thinking? Like, I think we can say what were you thinking,
but it cannot excuse.
Question. No, and not as an excuse, but I mean, it's a natural, honest question and reaction. I think that it's like, well, wait a minute, because look, some of these parents were saying, well, he was acquitted. But
yeah, that part drove me insane.
Our parents, our aunties, whatever, if there is speculation about someone being a deviant or someone being, even think about when you were growing up and you might have had a friend who was maybe borderline like a troublemaker or got in trouble, your parents would
I was
just
that
the
friend.
perception. Well, sorry,
Well,
right?
I was that friend.
Just the perception of that person prompts your parents to say, you know what, I don't want you hanging out with him because I heard that he does such and such and such and such and such. So why didn't these parents have that mindset? Like, wait a minute, I didn't heard all these things about R. Kelly, about him, peeing on little girls and all of these disgusting things. Like, I've heard about these things. In my mind, it's like, wait a minute, I'm going to keep my child as far away from that as possible.
But you just made the point that is exactly what I was saying a moment ago when we went into the whole mentality behind, us not rallying behind young black girls, in a sense, because you said if your parent knew of a friend who was kind of that friend to worry about, that friend that you said, the parents would say, well, I heard they're into this, they're into that. You stay away from them. That speaks to, again, putting the onus on the victim, not confronting. Now, it's a different type of scenario you're talking, because you're talking about peers and two kids.
Right.
But I mean, that plays the role in what we're discussing of no one really stepping up for these girls and really trying to protect them. When you put the onus on a child, children make children-like decisions. I mean, they don't have the wherewithal or the foresight to see down the road. So when you say things like, and I can use myself as an example, because in my own experience, falling victim to who I can now recognize, I mean, and this was multiple times. I mean, if you're a black woman, and you at some point were a black girl and you grew up, in the hood, if you will, then you know that this happens all the time, and that black men, and it could just be because that's what was around us. If we were in a diverse neighborhood, maybe it would have been all men. But black men try, not all, but there are black men who try to get at black girls all the time. Young black girls who they know are well below the age of consent, well below the age of any real knowledge of self, and they are predatory. They prey on weak girls sometimes without fathers, girls with some type of, we all suffer from some type of self-esteem issue around that age, but the weakest are the ones that they will prey on the most. And in those cases, in my own case, I got what you just were saying. I was told when someone maybe threw up a red flag that could have been a predator, that I was yelled at, like, you stay away from them. You don't you? I mean, and for me, this happened with my 23-year-old neighbor. I was 13, seduced by this person, which later led to a sexual relationship. And I don't even know if my mother even knows about this to this day, but I do recall being told, like, when a flag was raised, like, stop walking out there, having them look at you and that kind of thing. Like, it was like I was doing something not.
And that's not what I was saying. I think my question is, where does the onus fall on the parents, right? I'm not saying that, because you're right. Obviously, in the situation where R. Kelly is involved with a 14 or a 15-year-old girl, you're expecting R. Kelly to be the adult and say, this is wrong, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing.
Of course.
And of course he's not, because he's a deviant. But in the instances with these parents and essentially them introducing or being involved or present during the introduction of their child to R. Kelly, the onus falls on them. Like,
I agree with you
in not wrong
in one way. I agree.
If my daughter was a talented singer and somebody came up to me, now I know one of the parents said that they were under the understanding that their relationship was going to be with Sony Records, and that R. Kelly was only going to be involved as a producer. And this wasn't on the documentary. I watched a V103 interview with the parents of, I think it was the Jocelyn Savage.
The Savages.
Yeah, with their parents.
Yeah, that's
and they said during the interview that their understanding was their relationship was going to be with Sony Records, and that R. Kelly was just coming in to produce a couple of songs.
Yeah.
But the person, however, who came to the Savages, you know, wanting to get their daughter to join or wanted to get their daughter to sign with Sony Records was R. Kelly's road manager, which they came to find out later. So at some point, the onus, you know, you have some questions for the parents, right? So, I mean, it's a hard thing, right? Because R. Kelly is the person that ultimately did all these things.
Yes.
And he's the person that should face the brunt of it all. I
mean, and I saw the V103 interview that you are speaking of, and it was the Savages, Joycelyn Savage's parents, who were on the radio show, which they also stream or show on or record for YouTube. And that's really where I was just like, oh my gosh, the level of victim shaming. And I'm going to lump the parents in as victims here, because losing your child to
and then I think we should be clear too,
makes you a victim.
I also don't believe that any parent wants their child to become victim of or succumb to R. Kelly. Like, I don't believe any parent is like, hey, you know, I heard about all these things R. Kelly did, but you know what? I don't care about that. I'm going to send my child with him anyway because, oh, he's a great musician and I feel like my daughter is an up-and-coming musician and he can be a great mentor. I just don't believe that a parent would intentionally put their child in harm's way.
And I see where you're coming from with that. But in the case of R.Kelly's parents, you know, and this was the one little stickler for me as it relates to them that was so hard to process. Being that I'm on the other side of this thing, and I don't think we should be vilifying these parents, it's hard for me to process why, in their case, their daughter first encountered R. Kelly at a concert that they attended in celebration of the father's birthday. So even if, let's just say, even if you and I were such, or you even was an R. Kelly fan, and I decided that we're both adults, we're not, you know, necessarily people that can be...
You're not R. Kelly's type.
Right. I'm too old, way too old, like 30 years too old or whatever. But no, we couldn't be taken advantage of, and you liked R. Kelly so much that I decided I would take you to a concert for your birthday. I don't think anything in me post-trial, going back to, you know, that's a pivotal point for me, at least in my mind, of processing some of what occurred. I don't see anything that would make me say, well, let me take my daughter, my 17-year-old daughter with me, or let me take my 17-year-old niece with me, or any young woman. And especially, there was a point where I guess girls were called up on stage, and this is how she came to actually come in contact with him or his camp. So from the stage, there was a portion where you end up backstage, and it was just a lot to understand of why any of that would happen. Like, why would you even take her to the concert? I get that she's a singer, and she, unlike some of these other girls, not, you know, talking about anybody's talent, but I think there was to talk about Joycelyn Savage being a singer, but
right,
there are YouTube videos, and I don't know. That's the interesting that they would go there. But R.Kelly actually has a great voice, and there are older YouTube videos of her singing, and her talent is undeniable if you look at that. But this is a 17-year-old girl. At that time, I believe it was over summer or junior in high school, had not even started her senior year of high school. So she probably maybe had just turned 17, probably was just recently 16, and taking her to the concert, allowing her on a stage, allowing her, I mean, I get it. She's a singer, so you wanted that for her in some way, but it's just like all the other singers in the world, take her to Trey Songz concert. Not to say she couldn't be
I'm
victimized.
about to say,
but
I don't know.
I mean,
no, you can't accuse Trey Songz of anything.
I guess Chris Brown and R.Kelly are the two that you wouldn't want take your daughter to the concert. I mean, I don't know. I don't understand. It's just like, why would this be the avenue that
say,
you?
Wait a minute. A lot of girls go to Chris Brown concerts still.
But I'm just saying, as your daughter, wanting her to come in contact with that person, like not just going to be entertained. They clearly want. They clearly situation. Right. Oh, like okay. He beats women, okay. So they clearly wanted her to come in contact. It's different that it's going as a spectator and going with the intention of having interaction. You know what I'm saying? Sure. So why would that be the singer that you would want? So yes, I have some trouble processing that. And even still, I am willing to stand with conviction on the side of it does not matter. I don't quite understand it, but I don't need to understand it because he is still a predator.
Right. So
I have a problem with that.
So sure. And I'm on the kind of in between, right? I have questions for the parents, but even with questions for the parents, my heart can go out to them and I can feel so much, empathy and pain for those parents because I can't imagine what they are going through. Seeing the family of I think it was the Azriel girl, seeing them go to that studio in Chicago and throwing rocks at the window and all of that stuff. That is heartbreaking. Seeing the one mom, Dominique's mom, and shout out to Dominique's mom. She was like, hey, I'm in California. There's no way I'm going to be in this state and not try to find my daughter. Right,
in the city, close to where so in the case of Dominique Gardner's mother, for those of you, if you haven't seen the docuseries, we're giving plenty of spoiler alerts. So by now, we are just hoping everyone has seen it. If you haven't, you might want to just skip forward or come back to us when you watched it. But Dominique Gardner's mother is yet another victim who, at the time of the docuseries being recorded, was still within his harem, if you will, or cult is what they've called it on television. And she lost her daughter somewhere around 14. Well, her daughter first came in contact with R.Kelly around the age of 14. And again, without her knowledge, so she's a parent. And that's what I say. And that's the problem that I have with us kind of asking that question. Well, what about the parent? Only because, and this is why we brought up Azriel Clary's parents specifically, because they actually took their daughter to a concert. Unlike Dominique Gardner's mother, who I think, that's a risky place to land because your children undoubtedly will do many, many things that you will never know about.
Yep.
And they just don't end up falling victim to a celebrity and hold up in the house for years and years. But that's not to say that they don't do things without your knowledge, without your consent, and things that you otherwise would not want them to do.
Facts.
So, I mean, it's tough to like go there with it. But in the case of Dominique Gardner, her mother learned from a friend that Dominique was hanging out at R.Kelly's house. Dominique was actually kind of lured in, if you will, or pulled into this whole web of his through another young girl, Geronda Pace, who befriended her on MySpace, and they became friends.
Wow, that's how long this goes back.
Right.
MySpace?
Right.
Wow.
Right. So they befriended each other on their love for R. Kelly. So she didn't even really know this girl outside of the internet initially.
And the mutual admiration for
Right.
For
They bonded online over the mutual admiration for R. Kelly. So when she was asked if she knew any girls that she could bring, I guess, to him, she thought about this Dominique girl, reached out to her. Fast forward, Dominique ends up at the house with him. Geronda Pace was aware that this girl was somewhere in the house, but could never get to see her. Knowing that she is the one who, I guess, lit the fire to get her there, but she was never able to see her. So Dominique's mother, right from the start was like, okay, my daughter is a teenager. When she found out she was there, she went there. She
She asked her daughter for her phone. She asked her daughter to call.
But that was after she got her back the first time. She was there the first time. Like, when she found out she was there, she went there looking for her daughter. She got her daughter from his house. And maybe at that time, being a minor, he wasn't actually holding her. Like, she was able just to go there and just leave or whatever.
And called him and said,
well, she did. Off. She said once her daughter was back with her, you know, she knows that she's talking to him, she's seeing him. She gave him a call and said, look, you don't know me, but you will need to stay away from my daughter. And I guess for a while he did, but clearly the contact did not cease. So fast forward to some years later, her daughter graduated from high school, was going to a vocational school or community college that they were both actually attending together, the mother and the daughter. And her mother says, you know, she was doing well. She was doing well. But the seeds he had planted and the things that he had done to her mind obviously had already, you know, had already taken root. So now she is an adult. She's 18, and she says R.Kelly asked her to move to Atlanta with him. And that is where she lost her daughter, thankfully not for good, but lost contact. So that's a part of this whole thing that we need to talk about, is that for the people out there caping for R.Kelly who's saying, you know, well, these girls now are adults, okay? They are adult young women at this point. And so those that are caping, and Joycelyn was a adult when she went into his flock at the age of 19. So for all those that are saying, well, they're grown and they don't want to leave, and it's like, but let's put it all in the context. Like, we can't just take little niblets off of this thing and make it to what we want it to be. What healthy relationship do you know where the person isn't allowed to interact with their family, with their loved ones, with their friends, who seemingly all but disappear off the face of the earth, where they need to ask to eat and ask to relieve themselves? I think one of the girls even said, in the case of the Clarys, the sister who went to Chicago with Azriel at the point of her kind of being inducted into the flock, if you will, what she saw in the studio in these multiple rooms where every room had a young girl in it, was, she explained seeing buckets in the corner, like the kind of bucket that you would get from Home Depot or Lowe's or something, you know, those big orange buckets, where it appeared that these girls were held in these rooms and actually using a bucket to relieve themselves. I mean, the fact that they're not able to speak, if someone walks into a room with them, they are taught to look straight ahead and not acknowledge others. And even Sparkle spoke to that, because she clearly, you know, at some point she was an adult, but she started out, at least they alluded to almost that she was in a relationship with him as well, because she said that there was a time where he told her, you know, you don't speak to them. And I've seen her since say a little bit more about it on a separate interview with a local news show. Local, I think that being Chicago or somewhere, where she said he's so manipulative and such a skilled predator that she said that even that aspect of him, he had a way to spin it to make it as if it was complimentary to you. So what he told her about the whole, you know, you don't need to speak to other people, was something along the lines of, don't speak to them. Like, they're nothing to you. You're above them. You don't need to speak to them. So even that, and his manipulation, is making it seem as if he holds you in such high regard that these other people are so beneath you that they don't even bother offering them your words, like that kind of thing. I mean, and that's some skilled manipulator, predatory type shit, okay? Like, you know, there's a line, a whole thread of everything that we learned about R.Kelly that speaks to the whole pimp culture. That is a whole nother caveat of this thing. And again, going back to us us standing on the wrong side of morality in our culture with a lot of things, we have elevated pimp culture to be something sensationalized too. So is there an aspect of that whole thing why it's hard for us to have a problem when we should have a problem with people? I mean, we love us some pimp culture.
I mean, it's in music.
We bump Too Short. The whole thing, the books, the movies, we have promoted
and even growing
that
up in culture, right? You think about a young man who braggadocious about how many girls he might be talking to or dating at one time, and that's a badge of honor because dudes be like, "Oh man, you a pimp, man. Oh yeah, you a pimp." So yeah, you're right. Pimp culture is something that is definitely an underlying highlight of this documentary
because he runs this house and this group of women much like
don't look at people when they enter the room. Don't go nowhere unless I tell you to go. Check in with me. All of that is pimp culture personified.
Right, yeah, because pimp culture is about control. It's about control, and it's about exploitation and exploiting young women, and that is exactly what he's doing. And I mean, even down to, there are some reports, now this wasn't a part of the docuseries, but in all the chatter that has happened since the airing of the docuseries, obviously there's a ton of information out there. Who's to say what of it is correct and what of it isn't? But there are reports and speculation that the so-called mother of the house is that young girl, the 14-year-old Rashonda Landfair, is the girl who did not take part in the docuseries, would not participate in the trial, but she's the girl on the tape that he allegedly urinated on at the age of 14, and it is said that she still has a romantic relationship with R.Kelly to this day, and that she is the one in the house that they call the mother, if you will, that trains the others about how to please him and what makes him happy, what makes him not happy, and how to stay in line. Wow. Now that is all just talk. If you are on YouTube, if you're on social media, you can find a lot of content that speaks to that whole narrative. We don't know if it's true or not true, but if it is, I mean, that makes this even more just disgusting. But it also shows his reach. And the reason why it's almost believable, like, not that it is, but that it could be, is because you have to think about how traumatized and how much control he must have had even at that age for her to not be willing, and her family. I mean, what does it do to the psyche of a young girl when her family won't stand up for her? So basically, because I'm sure she was following the lead of her parents. The only
person that would is her aunt.
Is her aunt. Her aunt, who ended up estranged from her own family. Right. She ended up losing her family for 10 years. Sparkle, in a later interview, said she did not speak to her family from 2001 to 2011, that they were completely estranged because of the fact that she was like, no, this is my niece and I want him prosecuted. I want him to pay for it. This is a crime. And the brother's wife, and the niece, who was a minor, she's a victim, so we want her. She followed the lead of her parents. I believe if her parents were willing to step up and really to fight for her and to say, my child was victimized and I want to do something about it, then she would have followed that. But when the adults around you, when your parents, the people that are supposed to love you, are telling you, well, we're just gonna, I don't know what they would say. I can't imagine being in that situation, but basically we're going to forget about it and we're not, then how does that play on your psyche? How does that play in the way that you view yourself? And what does that do to you mentally? So to think that she could now possibly be still under his I think it's possible, because I just imagine all of the trauma, that could be caused, and the almost, irreparable damage that could be caused to your mind if you were placed in that position at the young age of 14. You say by the time the trial came, she was
20 or 21.
Yeah, 20. So she was not a minor any longer. And that was part of that whole thing of why it took the trial so long to come to pass, is explored in the docuseries as well, where they talk about the way that he strategically stalled that trial happening, because his legal team. It was a strategic move. It was a smart strategic move from a legal aspect. You don't want to put, even a 16-year-old girl up on the stage who was 14 on the stand, who was 14 just 2 years ago. I mean, who's to say, for all the years that they had, that's a lot of time for him to work on that family and work them into getting to a place where they didn't want to participate with a trial and didn't want to be witnesses against him. But also, had they decided to do it, putting a 20-year-old woman up there versus a 14 or 15 or 16-year-old girl is a lot different.
Sure.
So either way, he played it, and his legal team played it to his advantage. But we just really have to look at, like we said in the beginning, we gave R.Kelly a pass, a huge one.
And it's a tough situation for parents, to be in that instance. And so now we go from that to, and you brought this up earlier when you talked about R. Kelly's ability to cast a net and how he was able to interact and meet all of these young girls who are now women. He was able to do that because, and we find this out in the documentary, he had so many enablers who just allowed him to, or I don't want to say allowed him, but who were okay seemingly with this behavior.
Well, you said it right the first time. They allowed it.
Yeah.
They allowed it and encouraged it and made it much easier for him.
Right. And so you had this one person who appeared on the documentary whose voice was masked, who gave detailed accounts of their involvement in the house. Then you had this road manager who, he just pissed me off at various times throughout the documentary, from his almost like smirking or smiling when he was giving accounts of like R. Kelly's time with Aaliyah and how they were so close and all these different things. And so then you go to the high school where R. Kelly seemingly had, it was a recruiting ground for him, as we've talked about before. He was basically going to the high school like he was Nick Saban or Jim Harbaugh, like recruiting young girls for his flock, as you said earlier.
Right.
So,
and I don't know if he was a part of the team that was recruiting at the high school, but that in itself speaks to, the whole enabler thing, be it intentional or unintentional. Speaking of his road manager, obviously that was very intentional. But when you talk about enablers, just think about the faculty at this high school that he became. It was just like common knowledge that he frequented this high school to the point of being a staple there, and got many girls to enter into these relationships or come into contact with him from his presence there at Kenwood High School in Chicago. And when I just think about faculty members, I'm wondering, like, okay, administrators, teachers, counselors, lunch lady, security guard, what were their thoughts when they saw this grown man coming frequently to the high school and enamoring young girls for quite a while? This wasn't like 1-2 visits, because I think, like, okay, first visit, second visit, third visit, you think here's a hometown celebrity showing love to the kids, inner city kids, and it's all good. But at some point as an adult, we're didn't get older not being wiser, so something would have said to you, you would have known. And not to mention, in the high school, no matter how big the high school, news travels fast. If R. Kelly was there, if girls were getting with him because of his presence there at the high school, it was not going to stay under wraps long.
Word spreads super fast. So
they would have known. So right. I cannot imagine, like, if my child went to that school, let's say in the early to late 90s, and I know my child was a student there, and I knew that there were faculty members that allowed him to basically use it as almost like a hunting ground. I mean, I would be livid. Like, what is wrong with you? How did y'all allow this? It's just crazy. And going back to the manager, he seemed to be more of a recruiter. He talked about traveling the country with R. Kelly and going to malls. Like, that was another one of his things. So when he was home in Chicago, it was this Kenwood High School that kind of was his hunting ground. When he was out on the road, it was the concert itself, pulling girls from the audience, and malls. He loved going to malls, and this was they had a whole kind of system of it where they went to the malls. Of course, young girls hang out at malls.
So yeah, so the enabler thing is just crazy, right?
I mean, on many levels. You have the women that are put into the audience at the concerts who will then, speaking of this, oh my gosh. So there is a YouTube channel, a YouTube personality. I believe her YouTube channel is Being Taylor Marie, who documents or has a short video out of her interaction with R. Kelly. Thankfully, she never became one of his victims. But when I tell you, this girl outlines, and she's able to show the picture. There's pictures, there's video of her encountering R. Kelly. And it speaks to those enablers that you're talking about, because literally it's the same thing. So she was not a part of this docuseries, never became one of his long-term victims or anything like that. But she just documents that she went to an R. Kelly concert, I believe in 2000. It may have even been 2016 or 17. So this wasn't that long ago. And I guess at the time she's a 20-year-old in college. I don't know how they happened upon the tickets, but I guess in college, you know, maybe there's not a lot to do on the weekend. So when you can get, you know, something to do, it doesn't have to be like your favorite artist, but you just go. So a group of friends go to this R. Kelly concert. There, she speaks to the fact that they're one of the younger groups there. She was like, all the women around her were like true R. Kelly fans in the sense of age, what you would expect an R. Kelly fan
rocking with him since, you know,
to be
12 play,
right. Which, and at this point he shouldn't have any fans, but y'all just still y'all just can't do right. So she talks about they ended up getting right up front, and there was a point in time where she has video, like she Snapchatted this whole thing where he's kind of leaning over, touching the hands of fans as they reach up, because they were that close to touch the stage. And as they're touching he's touching the hands of fans, you know, she reaches out. Again, she's 20. Don't ask me why she was there and why she wanted to fan girl R. Kelly, but she did. So she reaches out, he touches her hand, so now he really sees her. He touches her hand, and she's like, shortly after that, she has a woman come to her, tap her on her shoulder, and say, "Excuse me, security wants to talk to you." And she said, and she even says it, she's like, you know, I'm young, I don't know. She was like, maybe it was just like being young and not knowing. She was like, even then I thought, oh my God, did I do something wrong? Why does security want to talk to me? She went right to a place of, I must have did something wrong. So she goes to talk to security, only to find out it's not security for the venue, it's R. Kelly security. And he tells her that do they want to invites them to a party after or something, and asks them, do they want to meet R. Kelly? Do they want to come to this party after and take pictures or whatnot? So she's like, okay. And I think that is where there was an exchange of numbers, or him giving her a number or something about R. Kelly. It could have happened later, but don't quote me. But the video is out there. Taylor Marie. So she says that after the concert, they make their way to some door where they're trying to then partake in what they were offered, which was to get backstage and whatever. And the venue security wouldn't let them through, was telling them, and they're telling them, no, they told us to come here and to stand here and that we could come back. And the venue security is like, yeah. Like, people say that all the time.
Right.
So what? So they think they're being turned away. The R. Kelly security tracks them down and finds them to say, oh, no, they can come. Because she said they had all given up on getting to him. Because, again, she talks in the video about how, they were there for something to do, I guess, not because anyone was necessarily a huge R. Kelly fan. So they let it go. So fast forward, they end up meeting him. She has pictures that she shows and puts into this video, the pictures that were taken backstage, which are normal fan pictures, pose with the celebrity, take the picture. But it goes on to say that, then there was an exchange of numbers. Why don't you call me? And at some point they got to the point of FaceTiming each other. So she's FaceTiming on her phone. Someone else is recording this interaction. Her holding her phone. You can clearly see R. Kelly's face on the FaceTime, clearly hear his voice. And this is like one of their first conversations after texting back and forth a little bit. And he asks her, how old are you? She says, I'm 20. There's a pause. Now, I couldn't tell if the pause was relief or if the pause was like, oh, like disappointment. Like, what? You 20? Damn. You almost not meeting my threshold. Like, you can't really tell, but there is an audible and visual pause there. And I don't know if it was like, yeah. Because she looks younger than she is. If you watch this video, she looks younger. And you can clearly say if she's the one he picked out. Oh, and let me fast forward. There's a part. So the number exchange happens in that first interaction with his security. Because she talks about, and she has on tape on the Snapchat, where even after that exchange happens and they go back to just being spectators in the crowd, still in the front, rocking along to the shows, where he gestures her like you gonna call me? I'm using my hand right now. You guys can't see me, but he gestures her with her hand, like while singing, looks directly at her and does the motion that you will when you hold your hand to your face, like, what's up? Call me. So that happened. So anyway, he asked her on this FaceTime video, when are you coming to see me? And she's like, well, come and see you where? I can't remember what city it was that they went to this concert, but she's like, in Chicago. And he's telling her, it doesn't matter where. When you ready, you can come wherever. Basically telling her he will get her flued out. No, I mean flown out, but wherever. So it's the whole thing that we heard about in that docuseries about as it relates to that first interaction and how it all works.
He's such a nice guy, and he's so charming, and he's
right.
So this
and
so
the
that.
Enablers, as you were speaking of,
right.
The woman in the crowd. I want to find that woman in the crowd. I want to fight that woman in the crowd and the woman in every crowd that tapped a young girl on the shoulder and said, R. Kelly wants to meet you, or do you want to come to an after party, or do you want to go backstage? Those are the women that I want to punch in the face, because how do you do this knowing what is down the road, or what could be down the road for these young women? How can you, in good conscience, well, we don't even say in good conscience, because clearly they don't have good conscience, do that to someone's daughter, someone's sister, aunt, niece, nephew? That's why I have such a problem with the victim shaming, because they are me, I am them. If you are a woman, if you are a black woman and you are caping for R. Kelly, and if you are victim shaming, you are the new 53%. And by that I mean the 53% of white women that voted for Trump, that got us into this craziness that we're in now. Like, you are going against your own interests. You are hating yourself. You are contributing to your own detriment. And when I say your own, I mean it, because we are one. Like, I see myself in those young women. I know it very well could have been me. Had I ever encountered R.Kelly at age of like 17 or 14 or 15, where you're young and impressionable and you got this older man, not, with money. Some of us fell victim to older men with no damn money, with nothing. So the fact that you have women out here saying that they don't understand how they could be so, even now, the most recent episode of Facebook's popular Red Table Talk with Jada Pinkett Smith is a 2-part episode with one of the victims, Lisa Van Allen, who got with R. Kelly at 17, was more of like a girlfriend. She's actually the other girl in the infamous tape with the 14-year-old girl, which she was forced into threesomes with this young girl, not knowing her true age. But the amount of victim shaming in the comments of even the trailer for that new Red Table Talk is crazy. It is.
So it hasn't come out yet.
It actually drops today, I believe. It's a special episode. So normally Red Table Talk airs on Mondays. But this was a special, and I believe it aired today. But yesterday they started promoting, and when I'm saying today, guys, it's Saturday. You're not hearing this on Saturday, but it is Saturday, January 12th. So it'll be a couple days.
So it's not the Today Show. We a podcast.
But I'm just saying, when we're talking about when it airs. So by the time you hear this, the Red Table Talk will be out there, because I think it's out there right now. And it is a 2-part. So I haven't even watched the episode yet. But what I did watch was just the little teaser for the episode. And within that teaser, the comments of almost all women victim shaming this woman is disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. And what I say to them is, you guys talk about how could she at 17, you know better, you wanted this or you wanted that from him, and this is why you did this. Come on now. It's some women out here 30, 40, 50 years old doing things to keep and please a man that is to their own detriment. So don't sit high and look low and tell me that you can't understand how a 17-year-old girl could do things that she otherwise would not do, or know to not be in her best interest, to keep, to please, and to what she thought was show love to a man that she felt that she was in love with. Don't tell me you can't understand that, because some of y'all out here 30, 40, 50 years old doing things against your better judgment to keep and please a man. But that is somewhat of the vein of the comments. It's like, and let's be clear, these are girls, be it 17 and of the age of consent or whatever, that are going up against a skilled predator. He had years in the game of doing this and perfecting it. If this was money management, he is the Dave Ramsey of
pedophilia,
of pedophiles and manipulation and pimp mentality and pimp control over women. So come on. We have to stop with the victim shaming. Getting back to your point of the enablers, those women, like the women that are tapping girls on the shoulder saying R. Kelly wants to meet you, the tour manager whose name was Demetrius something or other.
Why you had to put that out there? Why you had to say his name was Demetrius? I mean, is that relevant to what we're talking about right now? Because
I'm just
first
saying.
of all, my name's Demetrius. I don't have an I in my name, so it was not me. Before people be like, "Oh, Meech from the
I wasn't going that far into it." But yes, his demeanor when he spoke about his part, his role, him, getting Aaliyah because they thought she was pregnant, and all of that was disturbing. It was disturbing to watch him recount it, because he almost seemed proud.
Yeah.
Of his part. And we all know celebrities have a lot of yes people around them. So there were other people You know, there were women, there were men. I mean, the brother, how sick was that? The brother, I don't know that he falls in the enabler.
Well, he's in jail, so how much can he enable?
He falls in the enabler. He wasn't always in jail.
Well, he falls in the defender category for sure. He defended him by saying, well, we all have preferences, right?
I mean, that will go down. That's like a soundbite, like in history, because I almost threw my shoe at the TV when he said that. I mean, he literally says, well, I like older women. He liked younger women. What's the big deal? We all have preferences. It's like, dude. And then he throws the other brother under the bus, the younger brother, who R.Kelly actually tried, or at least his legal team tried to push the blame toward the younger brother. By saying first calling them twins, which they are not, and then when it came out there they weren't twins, talking about the similarities and how they look, which they look
and
nothing.
What brother or person or whatever?
Nothing alike.
Do you know that wouldn't be mad in that situation?
Well, he was
like,
mad.
It's a video of me. It's a video of you. Urinating on a girl, and then you gonna say it's me?
Well, he was
mad. He was mad. And he aired him out on Wendy Williams.
And I'm speaking to. This is the brother that's in prison. I'm speaking about that brother then saying that the younger brother, who R. Kelly tried to pin it on, should have taken the money. He said, you would have been rich. He was going to give you $100,000. In what world?
And record an album.
In what world does $100,000 make you rich? Like, that's not rich. Like, I was like, how long has this man been in prison? Because he clearly does not know the toll inflation has taken on the world.
Yeah. I mean, I could use $100K right now,
but that would not make you rich.
But it wouldn't make me rich. So, yeah, the enablers were crazy, and just to kind of put a bow on all of this, one of the more disturbing points in the documentary was just this whole, and we've been talking about it throughout this episode, just the whole believability of black women. And they had this juror on there who said that he went with the not guilty verdict in R. Kelly's pornography trial because he just looked at these women and he did not believe them. And that just speaks to a bigger issue that we have in society, speaks to a big issue that we have in our own black culture, not just society at large, but just within our own culture. As Martha has been pointing out through some of the comments she saw when they were promoting the Red Table Talk, some of the callers in this V103 interview that's on YouTube, where V103's interviewing the Savage family, and some of these people that were calling in, and they were all women.
Yeah.
They were all
women. And they gave zero Fs.
They did not show an ounce of sympathy.
No mercy.
So it just speaks to this large issue of we have to start standing up for our black women.
Do black girls really matter?
And they should, especially within our own culture. Yeah. This
shows us that they don't. Our behavior and our being complicit around the R. Kelly issue for many, many years. I myself stopped buying his music, never went to his concerts after the whole, again, like I said, it was a turning point for me. The trial, post-trial did not, but then was given the Chocolate Factory CD, and I did bump it. So I am also a part of the problem that I'm talking about us not believing, enabling, being complicit, and giving the past that we gave for so long. And I think that's why I stand with so much conviction now that I won't even ride I'm not even willing to give an inch to ride the fence and do any form of questioning of the parents' decisions, because I feel like that even puts me back in a space a little bit of giving him an inch, and I refuse to give him even an inch at this point. With him being a predator.
I mean, if you're in the black culture, if you're an African American, right? Your mom is as a black woman. Your aunt is a black woman. Your sister, if you have a sister, is a black woman.
Your favorite first cousin,
right? Your cousins. I mean, like.
Your favorite first cousin is a black woman. Shout out to my cousin Corey. I know I'm his favorite first cousin. I'm not his first cousin, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you for interrupting my point to point out that Corey is not even your first cousin. But
I'm a girl. I'm black. I'm correct. Female. And
So even if, right, like, think about if these women were those people in your life, you would stand up for them. You would believe them. You would stand up for them. And just because these women, you don't know them or have an attachment to them, and you feel like, guess what? Newsflash, you don't have an attachment to R.Kelly. You don't know him because you buy his record. You don't know him because you stepped in the name of love to his record. You don't know him. What we do know is that he's shown a pattern, and he's shown consistent behavior, and all of these allegations are out, and if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, 9 times out of 10 it's a duck.
Your love for good music should not trump your morality, and it's as simple as that.
Well said, Martha, well said. And that's a great place for us to end this episode of the Different Stokes podcast. We want to thank you guys so much for listening. We want to thank Martha, who shared some of her personal experiences in this episode as it relates to the Surviving R. Kelly documentary. We hope and pray that these parents who are still hoping that their daughters come home, we pray that they come home soon. And we also continue to pray for the survivors, that they continue to get closure and find solace in knowing that there is a group of people that ride for and defend our black women. Well, once again, thanks so much for listening to this episode. Be sure please to follow us on our social media outlets. You can find us on Facebook at Different Stokes Pod. We're also on Twitter at Meech and Martha. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. We're also, of course, on Anchor, where you can listen to previous episodes as well as catch our new episodes as soon as they drop. Well, once again, we want to thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the Different Stokes podcast. We'll see you guys next time. Hope you have a great week. Peace, fam. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Different Stokes podcast. Be sure to tune in to our next episode. You can also keep up with our podcast and download previous episodes on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and many other podcasting outlets. As always, we appreciate your support. Thanks for listening. Peace, fam.